The words of the 23rd Psalm. A psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. Giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit. Guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rabah from Congregation Chesed, and it's my great honor to be here officiating the funeral services for Louis Billinkoff Z, blessed memory, who was also known to the Jewish people by his Hebrew name, Yehuda Leib ben Yitzchak MINYAN. He was the son of Isaac and Minnie Billinkoff, blessed memory, beloved husband of Ruth for some 71 years. The brother Ernest and Ben, blessed memory. The father, Florence Billinkoff, and Aaron Billinkoff and Nicole Smith. The grandfather of Alex, Shel, Jordan, and Asher. The great-grandfather of Shel, Boaz, and Rabah. Luke passed away on Tuesday, March 14th, at the age of 99. So again, welcome everyone. Welcome also everyone at home. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. I would like to start with a teaching from the Mishnah. It's taken from Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, Mishnah 12. That it says, Rabbi Shimon was known to say, there are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, the crown of kingship. The crown of a good name is greater than them. Today we are saying farewell to a man made a name for himself. Luke was something like a Canadian celebrity, but the real good name came from the people who knew him best, who knew that his real achievements in life were his hard work, impeccable reputation, and his humility. Even though we spoke many times at the Kiddush table at Chesed, I never learned much of Lou's life beyond his printing adventures and perhaps his love for music. But beyond what he said to me, what I remember is that perennial smile that always accompanied his Shabbat Shalom, that made it clear how much he enjoyed coming to Shul to connect with his friends. I also recently learned, through a handwritten document actually, talking about his life, that Lou shared with his children and they kindly shared with me, that he came from humble beginnings and how his family went through some hard times during the Depression, which had a profound impact on his life. With his parents making many sacrifices so he could go to university. Perhaps this background can help us understand Lou's commitment to work a lot for his family. There is an old Hasidic parable about a man who brings his young son to the river in the middle of the winter to engage in the mystical practice of purifying immersion in water. The man lowers the boy into the cold water, and the boy shrieks, "Oi!" The father pulls the boy up, wraps him in a blanket, and the boy sighs, Mechaye. Mechaye is Yiddish word that means pleasure. The father said, Let this be a lesson to you, my son. Immersing in the waters is a holy ritual, and so it may start with an oi, but ends with a mechaye. Anything in life that starts with a mechaye is probably not only be not so holy, but most certainly will end with an oi. So Lou worked very hard for 40 years. He has his ois, but then he has the change to enjoy retirement and has his moment of mechaye. Lou attended private school where he learned the Yiddish language, so I probably wouldn't have to explain the word mechaye. And he always said how much he enjoyed Yiddish music. Lou met Ruth as a party actually for girls of the Jewish sorority and the men of the Bnei B'rith Maple Leaf Lodge. Lou was very involved with Bnei B'rith, and at one point he became its president. Lou remembered from that night that he drove Ruth home, and then they started to date till eventually they got married in 1951. Lou made many friends from all different things he did during his long and fruitful life. And as you can imagine, when you reach the age of 99, he outlived most of them. So during the Jewish funeral, we have lots of rituals and prayers. But the most important part is no doubt the eulogies. This has biblical roots, as we see that our father Abraham eulogized Sarah, his wife. The word eulogy means a good word. Giving a eulogy is a way to honor a person's life. It is also a way to provide comfort to those who are heartbroken. The eulogy expresses sorrow for the loss, yet celebrates and finds meaning in the person's life. That's why to begin the process to eulogize Louis Billinkoff Z, I would like to invite Lauren Billinkoff, one of his sons, come to the microphone to eulogize his father.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Dad was born in 1923, middle child of immigrant parents who came from the small town of Rzhichev, which is about 80 kilometers south of Kyiv. Dad's father came to Canada in 1912 and was followed by my grandmother 10 years later. When Todah left Rzhichev, he didn't know that my mother was pregnant. It's a long story, but it's not Dad's story. Dad was the first of the family to be born in Canada. He and his two brothers, Ernie and Ben, grew up in the North End with my grandparents, who had a second-hand shop. They were quite poor, and only Dad went to university, graduating from engineering in 1945, and immediately going to work at City Hydro, which later became Winnipeg Hydro, where he worked until he retired in 1985. Along with his duties at the Hydro, Dad was the chairman of the Winnipeg Employees Pension Committee, and at that time negotiated a new improved pension for all city employees. He was quite proud of that. Outside of work, Dad was a family man. He and my mother married in 1951, and they spent a staggering 71 years together. As soon as they got married, Dad got to work on plans for their first house on Oxford Street, while the two of them lived with my mother's parents on Church Avenue. There's a picture of my mom standing in front of the half-built house, pregnant with me. After several years, Dad got to work on plans for a new house on Elm Street, and we moved there after about 9 years in the Oxford house. Mom and Dad lived on Elm Street for 61 years, and were the last original owners left on the street, and stayed there as long as they could, having sold the house only 5 months ago and moved to the Portsmouth retirement residence. As I mentioned, Dad was a family man. He cherished his family and always made time for each of us. I remember him taking Errol and me fishing at Lockport, swimming at Selkirk Park, driving us to piano and swimming lessons and Cub Scouts, vacationing in Clear Lake, and going on motor vacations. Weekends were often spent visiting my grandparents or aunts, uncles, and cousins, which often included a stop at Colecca's for some chips on the way home from the North End. Later in life, once Errol and I had children, Mom and Dad loved to chip in and help with their grandchildren. We could always count on them when we needed their help looking after the kids. But I know Asher will talk more about that later. Mom and Dad enjoyed traveling together and went on several trips, including Asia, Britain, France, Switzerland, Spain, Holland, Mexico, and of course, several trips to Israel. They particularly enjoyed spending winter months in Dana Point for many years, and then, when they could no longer get the home that they had been renting, wintered in Palm Springs, which they also liked, but not as much. They missed the ocean. Over the past several years, as my mother's back pain worsened, Dad took over many of the daily chores, such as meal preparation and laundry. Once they decided to sell the house, it was like losing a child to them. Even though they had hired someone to take care of the contents of the house, Dad took it upon himself to pack up many of the things they weren't taking with them and donated them to charity. It was a huge task, but even at 99, he did it. I'd like to mention someone who was particularly helpful to my parents over the past several years. Their neighbor, Doug Crockett, took it upon himself to do whatever he could to help them with anything he could, even shoveling their snow without being asked. And Doug is here today. Thank you, Doug. In conclusion, I'd like to say that while we are all sad about Dad's passing, we also want to celebrate his life and his achievements. Sometimes we take our parents for granted and don't see them through the same eyes as others. This hit home for me when a friend of mine phoned me to tell me that he had heard of my dad's passing on CBC radio in Toronto. It occurred to me that if it was on CBC News in Toronto, that it must also be on the news in other cities across Canada. I had no idea that Dad was of national interest. He was that impressive.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Louis Billinkoff also wrote a eulogy that is going to be read for us by Nicole Smith. Please.
Thank you all for being here or watching at home as we celebrate the life of my father, Louis Billinkoff. For most of my life, my father seemed somewhat unremarkable. He wasn't a larger-than-life kind of guy. He didn't stand out in any particular way. He went to work before I left for school in the mornings and was reading the Winnipeg Free Press in his comfy chair by 5 p.m. every day. He drove me to my swimming and piano lessons. We didn't hang out together or throw the ball around in the yard. Sports were not part of his life. The closest we got to a father-son activity was when he taught me how to ride my bike. That seemed normal in the 50s and 60s. I know there was evidence in the house of him participating in sports. There were a few wooden shafted golf clubs in the basement, yet my mother denies that he ever golfed. There was also a curling room and a heavy blue knitted cardigan sweater and a Benet Bridge emblem. Apparently, for a brief time, he was a curler. Don't get me wrong, Lou had his accomplishments, as you heard from Lauren and we'll hear from Ash. All were impressive achievements. Looking back over my 66 years, however, there was very little that stood out about him. He seemed even-keeled and understated, kind and friendly, never once raising his voice. Lou was always described as a mensch. He had no particular hobbies, but had no vices either. He was a loving and fiercely devoted husband for over 70 years, and was a good father to his 2 boys, and a wonderful Zeta to his 4 grandchildren and his 3 great-grandchildren, all of whom he treasured. He was also an amazing son to his immigrant parents, particularly in their declining years. Lou was reliable. I think of him like fine wine that got better and better with age. I first noticed it when computers were invented. While most seniors were intimidated by this new technology, he didn't let his age stop him from becoming proficient with one. Then, in his 80s, he achieved mastery of his computer through tutorials with my brother after Friday night dinners. He received ongoing tech support from my brother. Later, my son Asher, the electrical engineer, also helped out. He mastered email, downloading music, and surfing the net. His computer prowess earned him the moniker Cyber Lou. His family and acquaintances became regular participants of these interesting articles and amusing jokes and videos. He became a collector of jazz music with more downloads than any jazz radio station. It wasn't until his heart attack at age 89 when ironically Lou really hit his stride. The prompt insertion of a stent by Dr. Malik Pass at St. Boniface Hospital into a blocked coronary artery led to Lou's finest decade. He suffered little heart damage and was advised to get some regular exercise, which he found boring. So reliable Lou did what he was told and began walking around the track at the refit center 3 times a week. After 3 years, the monotony finally got to him. Though he loved the refit, he needed to do something to make this task more interesting. That is when 92-year-old Lou began sprinting. For the first time in his life, he would walk, then sprint, then walk, then sprint. This didn't go unnoticed at the track. Lou was becoming a phenomenon, and the refit members and staff were amazed. One day he mentioned this to me, and he couldn't understand what the big deal was. To him, it came easily. As a doctor, I found this astounding and clearly out of the ordinary for a man of his age. Having heard of a Winnipeg man who set a world record for swimming at age 100, it occurred to me that what we needed was a record time for the idea. As we drove to the track together, it was me who was becoming nervous. Would it be injured himself, or did it face plant? I'd feel terribly guilty for suggesting it. He dismissed my concerns and reminded me that this is nothing that he doesn't already do several times a week. He was right. I was ready. Naturally, there were no other entries for the men's 90 to 94 100 meter that day, so Lou ran together with two young millennials. It was only his time that mattered for comparison with others his age. Lou's presence was quite apparent in his custom t-shirt that I had purchased for him with the oversized number 92 on the back. He was given a special introduction over the loudspeaker, and the crowd cheered him on. Though the two millennials left him in the dust, his pace was strong and impressive. No one could actually believe that they were watching a 92-year-old man running. It was something that no one had ever seen. He crossed the finish line to the roar of the crowd with a time of 20.97 seconds. This set a new Canadian record. Not just by a little, but by a lot. That was it. Lou was hooked. It became like a drug and consumed his attention ever since. Of course, I was enormously proud of this unlikely achievement. It was thus that the legend of Lightning Lou was born. He had suddenly become remarkable. This good news story turned Lou into a media darling and a local celebrity. Articles about him instantly appeared in the local press, including the front page of the Winnipeg Sun. Soon his story spread across the country, twice appearing on the CTV national news. He was honored during the halftime show at a Winnipeg Blue Bomber game. Another thrill for Lou was an invitation to an audience with then Mayor Brian Bowman, a fellow runner. A photographer was present to take photos as the young mayor and the elder sprinter raced across the courtyard at City Hall. I never heard who won. It didn't seem to matter. After achieving Canadian records for 60 and 100 meters so effortlessly, Lou now wanted more. He was setting his sights on the world. As his 95th birthday approached, he would be moving into the 95 to 99-year-old age class. He was well aware of how international competition thinned out in his class, with only a handful remaining. He began spending hours on YouTube studying various sprinting techniques, which raised important questions. Am I breathing properly? Should I be using my arms more? Should I be practicing with starting blocks, like Ben Johnson? It became clear that he needed professional coaching. We reached out to local coach Sheldon Reynolds, assuming that this crazy request would be quickly dismissed. After all, Sheldon was a serious coach for serious athletes. But to our amazement, Sheldon graciously and unreservedly agreed. Their sessions took place every Tuesday at the Qualico Training Center for Elite Athletes in the Exchange District. His 95th birthday was on June 5th, 2015, fittingly a Tuesday. On this occasion, a media scrum had gathered from all local media outlets at the Qualico Center. In what had become his signature style, Lou wore a luminous green t-shirt that had 95 on the back. Their headline was, "Local 95-year-old sprinter hopes to break world record." Then, 2 weeks later, when Lou crossed the finish line, his time of 29.73 seconds earned him the ranking of number 2 in the world. Not satisfied with his performance, he later entered the indoor 50-meter event at the U of M. On November 10th, 2018, Lou achieved his greatest sprinting success ever by setting the world record with a time of 14.58 seconds. The pandemic later ensued, putting an end to his training and motivation, but not his ability. Knowing that Lou had untapped talents, I unveiled a plan to reinvigorate the athlete. For his Just last fall, after 60 years at 846 Elm Street, the last original owners of the block decided it was time to sell their home and move to the Portsmouth. During a visit there just 2 short months ago, as his 100th birthday was approaching, I thought I might tempt my father into competing one last time. After all, new age class, even less competition. What could be easier? But Lou wasn't biting. He argued that he hadn't been training, wasn't in shape, and he couldn't possibly do it. As far as he was concerned, he had hung up his track shoes for the last time. Disheartened, but not entirely surprised, I kissed my parents goodbye and made my way out. He offered to walk me to the elevator. As the doors opened, he said, "Watch this," with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. As I turned around, I saw lightning Lou do his final sprint down the hall. It was then that I realized my father, who had taught me how to ride my bike, had been on an amazing journey and had taken me along for the ride. He leaves behind big track shoes to fill.
Thank you, Nicole. It's fascinating story. And I would like to invite now the presentation of Louis grandchildren, Louis Billinkoff, come to the microphone to present his eulogy.
Growing up, my brother Jordan, my cousins Alex and Mitchell, and I would play hide and seek with our Zeta in his River Heights basement on MINYAN Friday night. He would stand at the foot of the staircase, face against the wall, with his hands covering his eyes as he counted to 30. We would gallop around, trying to uncover every possible hiding spot in an effort to outsmart Zeta, under counters, inside laundry machines, or between coats in the closet. These games were so frequent that we quickly exhausted all of the premium spots, and to contend against such a worthy opponent, we would have to get more creative. One of us had the bright idea to stand behind him in a line while he searched for us. Like a boat with water skiers in tow, we would plow through all the familiar spots, with the 4 of us tiptoeing behind him. As he lurked further into the basement unsuccessfully, we would giggle like evil geniuses, thinking we had outfoxed him. After keeping up the act for way too long, he would throw his hands up at the feet while we let out a collective belly laugh, loud enough to let the adults upstairs know that we were having more fun than they were. Zeta's efforts to support our illusion of outwitting him made us feel so smart and proud. Although it was just a trivial game, I'm now grateful that he was willing to play along just to entertain us. Living down the street from my Rabah and Zeta while growing up was a blessing. They would host us for Shabbat dinner every week without fail, with a 4-course menu that was always to die for. Course number 1, garden salad. Course number 2, rotation between matzo ball soup or peanut barley soup. Course number 3 would have been any combination of the following: Rabah and Zeta, Rabah's famous crumbly chicken or sticky chicken, spaghetti and meatballs, stuffed mushroom caps, capellini, candied carrots, brisket, and of course, beef ribs. Yes, they were kosher. After walking in the front door, I would normally cruise by the table to see if the serrated knives with the black handles and diagonal knobs had been set. If they were out, I would broadcast a PSA to all attendees, advising that ribs were in the oven, and I would probably be needing a stretcher to haul me away from the table later. The full meal was always followed by delicious homemade dessert for which no one ever had any room. As a youngster, I failed to understand why Rabah and Zeta prepared enough food for an army, even though there were only a handful of us around the table. I came to realize that these dinners were labors of love on the part of my grandparents and reciprocated by simply wearing looser fitting pants to make room for the feast. After dinner, there would often be a casualty of overeating lying on the couch. Rabah and Zeta's dining room table was the hearth of our childhood, and this was confirmed by my brother's family roots project from 2001. In this project, students had to research one side of their family and design a crest representing family values, and Jordan decided to place their dining room table squarely in the center. We would look forward to Shabbat all week, and I would always be sure to get my preferred seat, sitting right beside my Zeta at the head of the table. Rabah and Zeta hosted our Shabbat dinners with apparent ease and always worked as a team. She did the cooking, and he handled the serving and cleanup. As an adult, I now realize what a massive undertaking this was, week in and week out. Immediately after dinner, the kids would raid the computer room. If dinner was called for 6:30, we would be firing up that clunky old Dell at 7 p.m. sharp. The most probable causes for the aforementioned clunkiness were either the 100 gigabytes of jazz music that Zeta had collected, or possibly all of the malware that we had incidentally downloaded from installing Icy Tower, Bubble Trouble, and many more. I must mention that Zeta installed these games for the benefit of the grandchildren only. Mitch, you are the most gifted Icy Tower player to come out of the Grey Academy, and if you weren't already on the athletic wall of excellence for table tennis, I would nominate you all over again. In later years, post-dinner game time would turn into troubleshooting sessions with Zeta. For his age, he was incredibly computer savvy. He spent hours upon hours at that computer and continued to amaze us with his affinity for tech. So much so that he earned the nickname Cyberloo. He would often have a list of tech tasks that were usually pretty straightforward, but to him, they were of the utmost importance. Through these sessions, I learned what a perfectionist my Zeta was. He was incredibly particular about every folder path name, bookmark, and email list. The amount of time he spent at the computer was so great, yet he had to reinforce the right armrest of his desk chair with wood to support his never-ending browsing. I would hover over his left shoulder, and he would click through the problem at hand. Then we would trade seats while I investigated and tried to find a solution. We would continue this dance back and forth until the list was complete and each item had been addressed. This was the closest I ever felt to him. Whenever I would solve one of his problems, he would be so pleased that he would light up like a streetlight. If there was something I couldn't figure out, he would always hide his dissatisfaction and thank me up and down for my efforts in his typical magnanimous manner. My Zeta really cultivated my interest in computers and tech, which inevitably led me into the field of engineering. Straight out of high school, I enrolled in the program at U of M and ultimately graduated from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. The culmination of the program, all new engineers are minted with the reception of an iron ring from an engineering mentor, friend, or relative. I was lucky enough to have had my Zeta present me with my iron ring, which is a moment steeped in emotion and celebration. The ring is a symbol of the pride that engineers are to have in their profession, and simultaneously reminds them of their humility. These two attributes describe my Zeta more succinctly than I ever could. In the halls of the engineering building, I tracked down a picture of my Zeta's 1945 graduating class, and thus confirmed my suspicions that even back then, he was a complete stud. Following his degree in electrical engineering, Zeta was hired by the City Hydro, now Manitoba Hydro, where he earned a base salary of $158 a month. He told us that not all of his classmates were able to find work, and he considered himself lucky to get a job. Some of his greatest achievements over his 40-year career included: as the head of lighting distribution, he led a project to install back-main lighting throughout the city. He led a project to relocate overhead wiring underground to help beautify the city, and installing Christmas lighting on Portage Avenue. Much like the Russian Jew Irving Berlin, who wrote White Christmas, Zeta never discriminated and knew how to shine his light on everyone. After retiring in 1985, he began receiving his pension, which continued for an astounding 38 years. Somewhere in the halls of the Hydro building, an accountant just let out a small sigh of relief. Outside of work, Zeta was known for his humble, loving, jovial, quirky, and organized personality. Whenever he was executing a project at the house, we would see shades of his professionalism shine through. He had a guy for everything: electrical, plumbing, snow removal, roof cleaning, painting, car repair, gardening, and more. Getting things done was never a problem for him. Now that I've covered the bigger picture of who he was, I'd like to increase the resolution a little bit. He entered every room with a big smile. He picked his bananas in Superstore at decreasing levels of brightness to ensure an optimal banana for every day of the week. He hated onions and loved his fish and chips. His recent favorite dinner spot was Fit McCool's, and George would always be sure to send Zeta a review of his fish and chips whenever they were apart. He grew delicious cherry tomatoes in his backyard every summer, and would always leave the fresh harvest on his counter for us to enjoy. Whenever people asked him, "What's your secret to longevity?" he would answer with shoulders shrugged, "I try not to wear myself out." He was fiercely independent right up until the very end. This independence was shared with some of his community members, when he would volunteer as a driver for Meals on Wheels and organize lunches at Rain Jerry's with his close group of friends. While working as an employee for Hydro, Zeta would always keep his eye on the streets for burned out lights. If he encountered one, he would take note of its location and ensure that it was dealt with promptly. After hearing these stories from a young age, I had formed this image of him as the man who kept the lights on in the city. Not only did his family depend on him, but the community did too. Through his tireless efforts to keep the streetlight shining bright and unconditional love of his family, Zeta embodied the spirit of the Ner Tamid, a symbol of God's unwavering presence and care for his people. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you, Asher. And it's incredible how we got, I would say, 3 different aspects of Lou's life. So thank you, Lord. Thank you, Errol. Thank you, Nicole, for reading it so beautifully. And thank you, Asher, for presenting yet another aspect of Lou that I'm pretty sure was unknown to many people. You see, I'd like to believe that everybody wants to live an inspiring life. I like to believe that everybody wants to bring value in this world and to have an impact on other people's lives. Lou lived such a life, inspiring hundreds to never give up, no matter their age. Perhaps one way to pay tribute to Lou's life is by doing the things we truly believe in, doing the things we are passionate about. Because you see, at the end of the day, this is the way towards living an inspiring life. So I would like to invite everyone now to rise for the El Malay Rock. El Malay Rock. החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום. על משכבו ונאמר אמן. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Louis Billinkoff, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. Let us all say, Amen. You may be seated. So in a few minutes, we're going to proceed in caravan fashion to the Chesed cemetery, located in the corner of Main Street and Armstrong Avenue. If you're following us with your car to the cemetery, please remember to turn on your four-way flashers. And please stop at red lights and stop signs. We're going to go to section 3 of the Chesed cemetery. Shiva is going to be observed at the home of Louis Billinkoff, 23 Hogwood Drive, Sunday, day 7 to 9 p.m., Monday and Tuesday 2 to 4 p.m., and 7 to 9 p.m. It's not really going to be any davening at the house, so feel free to come anytime from 2 to 7 to 9. It's not you have to come specific time for the service, so it gives a little bit more flexibility to everyone who would like to come and pay your respects to the family. Donations on Lou's memory could be made to the charity of your choice, and the family would like to extend thank you to some very important people who were involved in the good care that Lou received during the last few years. That includes his cardiologist, Dr. Malek Kass, and Maria Cerqueira was his housekeeper and caregiver and great help during that difficult time. And also, the family would like to thank the whole staff at St. Boniface Hospital for the great care they gave to him. And now, it's time to proceed to the next stage, which is going to the cemetery for the burial part. And for that, I'd like to invite everyone to rise. I would like to invite the pallbearers to assume their places alongside Lou's coffin. After we start moving the coffin towards the hearse, I would like to invite the immediate family to be the first one following the casket, and after that, everybody else can follow us to the hearse. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you to all of you at home for doing it. Hold on a minute. I will go first.